In this video, we're going to be talking about small multiples, and I'll be explaining what they are and how you can convert this line chart here to a small multiples line chart and this bar chart here to a small multiples bar chart. Hi, this is Jason from Effective Dashboards, helping maintenance and reliability professionals get the most out of Power BI. So welcome back to another video. So in this video, we're going to be looking at small multiples. So what are small multiples? Well, if we look at these two examples here, we've got at the bottom, we've got a line graph and it's got multiple lines on it. So what small multiples are essentially each one of these lines have been separated into a small line graph on its own, but all within the one visual. Okay, so that's all it's done really, and we can. It's normally an alternative either to these line charts here or to stacked column charts where you've got columns that are split into different categories. Okay, stacked on top of each other. So why are they potentially a better alternative? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, the access here can often be a bit of an issue. Okay, we can see here we've got a range of different values ranging from low or double figures. So we can see our operations and services are 97 and 93, and they're typically the double figures and low hundreds. But they're also in the same category or same range here as this maintenance and integrity, which are really in the mid 500s and even up to this at a high hundreds and almost at 1,000. And that can make it really difficult to see those low values and to identify trends and perhaps outliers at that value for that particular trend, for that particular category. So what that does is it makes it simpler to basically see each one of these on its own with its own y-axis. Okay, so we can see here we've scaled it. Now you don't need to do that. You can actually have each one using the same axis, and we'll cover that in a second. But you have got also the option to have an independent axis for each one of these. Now the other thing it does is we typically tend to look at a visualization, again focusing on this one at the bottom here, and then we look at it as a whole, and then we use a little bit of mental energy, which creates what's called a cognitive load, to really start to then pick and choose either a particular line or a particular aspect of some of the lines. So for example here, I'd be interested in perhaps this outlier here. This is looks like a seasonal trend here. This seems to be steady but trending down. But to look at each one of these, we've got to discount the others because we want to focus in on that one particular line. Whereas if these are split into separate charts, that separation and that splitting up of each of the different lines is already done, and then it makes it far easier to spot these trends or the outliers or some of the seasonal adjustments or what appears to be a seasonal kind of fluctuation there. So it just in general reduces the cognitive load. It makes it easier for people to interpret the data. Now it's one of these things that you just have to wait and put it in front of somebody, and if they think it's better, then great, it is better. If they don't think it's better and they prefer everything to be in one chart, then that's how it is. But it's certainly an alternative to try, and something that's really worth investigating in a bit more detail. So let's crack on, and I will explain how we create these. Okay, so I've just created a default line chart here with multiple lines as a legend. So if I just click on here, now I'm just getting myself used to this new interface here, which I think is good, but it just takes a little bit of time to get used to, where you actually configure the chart using these buttons here rather than the buttons at the side here. So we've got the date, we've got a department, we've got the department maintenance cost is the actual the measure that's been trended here, and then we've got a department, which is the legend, and that's what's been split here. Now what we can do with this is we simply just drag it into the small multiples, and it's created this small multiples here. Okay, so let's go and we'll start to configure this. So the first thing is there's a couple of areas that we need to look at. The one with most of the options is this small multiples here. So let's go into that first of all, and the key thing here is that you can actually pre-configure the number of rows and number of columns. Now in here it's being pre-configured to 2 rows and 2 columns. Now obviously there's 6 categories, so it's actually increased the number of columns here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to be 2 rows, and I'm going to change it to be 3 columns. Okay, because I want it to be 2 rows of 3. Now it'll also depend on the data that you're looking at, but it seems to be fine to begin with. Now we can go in and let's go and start adding a little bit of extra functionality to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a border. Okay, and now you can put a border around it all. Now I think that looks particularly great because it kind of gets rid of these values here. So I'm going to actually put a border just in the middle here. Okay, and I think that's pretty good. I'm going to leave it as a solid line, but I'm going to make it a lot lighter. In fact, maybe a little bit darker than that. Okay, so that just helps to kind of separate these out into actual lines here, into sort of separate areas, which I think is really good. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and change this so that each of these different y-axes can be tailored to each of the particular values here, because we've still got this issue here where these are on the same axis, which is 0 to 1000, and these values here, like I mentioned before, are like double figures, even or low hundreds. So we want each one of these to be scaled. So let's go up to the y-axis. There's a couple of toggles here. So the first one that's really relevant to small multiples is this one here, the shared x-axis. So I want to take that off. Okay, and then I want to, so what it's done is it's basically, if we see shared x-axis is on, it means we've got one axis for for the whole row here. Okay, now I need to take that off because I'm going to go now and scale to fit, and I'm going to turn that on. And basically what's happened is each one of these has now got its own axis range values. Okay, so that's the first thing. So let's go and we'll do a little bit more here on the line. Okay, so I want the line to be 2, 3 is a bit much, and 1 is just a little bit too weak. So we're going to stick it in as being 2, which I think is a good starting point there. And we want to start sort of cleaning this up and getting a little bit of white space. So let's go up to the size and style, and we're going to go to padding, and I'm just going to stick in the padding here to be 10. Okay, so that's just giving us a little bit of space, and then this is a little bit too big here, this title, so let's look at the title here. And I'm going to reduce that to 12. And I'm fine with the colour for that. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a divider. Okay, now you could put a subtitle. I am a fan of subtitles, but I'm going to leave it for just now. If you want to check, there's in the description I've got a video explaining what subtitles are, and it basically adds in an extra title underneath the main title here, and it can be really useful. But in this example here, I'm not going to use it, but I'm going to put in this divider, and I am going to ignore padding. I'm going to turn to off. Okay, we want it to be this line here to be this to basically honour the padding that we've got, just so that it actually lines up the title there, which is good. And I'm going to change this to be the same colour as the other ones here. Okay, so that's helping us now to actually see that there's each one of these is an entity in its own right, and we've sort of separated out in the titles across the top here. Now what I'm also going to do here is in spacing, I'm going to go to customize spacing, and I'm going to put a bit of spacing in here between the actual title and the divider and the main visual here. So let's turn these to 10. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm creating a bit of white space to give you the thinking space to actually see each one of these as a separate entity in its own right, even though it is within the visual here. And white space is really useful for creating that separation. Okay, so that's good. Now the next thing, I think these are just a little bit big, so I'm going to go and change the actual size of each one of these category titles here. So I'm going to go back into small multiples, and I'm going to go to title, and I'm going to just reduce these, and I'm also going to just change it to semi-bold here. Okay, so it's still there, but it isn't quite as in your face. Okay, now we don't need this telling us that it's a date, so let's go up to the x-axis, and we'll go to title, and I'm going to turn that off. Okay, we know these are dates here. And then again here we've got this description saying that it's cost. We know that it's cost because we've got department maintenance cost by date and department. I'm going to change that title in a second, but we'll turn off this this x-axis title here, this y-axis title here as well. Okay, so it's starting to get a little bit clearer, and I'm also going to reduce the size of these y-axis values. Just ever so slightly. Well, it's the lowest it can go there, but that's fine. And I'm happy with these kind of colours here, which are just a slight off black. Okay, they're not really black, but almost black. Right, okay, and I think I will just reduce the size of these x-axis values as well, down to 8. Okay, so that's starting to take shape. We can now see that these are individually segregated out from each other, and makes it that little bit easier to read the information that's displayed within each of the small multiples. So next we're going to go and change this title here, and I'm going to change this to Maintenance Cost Trend by Department. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to sort it, rather than sorting it alphabetically like it is here, I'm going to sort it by the largest to the smallest values. So I'm going to go to small multiples, and we're going to sort by department maintenance cost, and then I'm going to sort that descending. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to sort the department with the largest total cost. Okay, it's not just the largest cost in the final date or the first date or whatever, it's the largest sum of all of these values. But I think it just gives it a little bit more of a kind of a way to read in terms of, if you've no reason to sort these categories, then I always like to sort them by highest to lowest or lowest to highest, depending on what's more important in terms of the measure. So yep, we've got maintenance, integrity, drilling, operations, wells and services. So you can see that these are from high to low. You can't really notice it too much until you look at the scales here, but it's just a personal preference. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the options here in small multiples, to add some padding. So the padding around about each one of these is 12 at the moment. Now you can also open this up and you can customize this padding. Now the options are the inner column padding, the outer column padding, the inner row padding, and the outer row padding. Now I think 12 is actually okay, but what you can do is you can actually change this a little bit. So to see which one each of these actually impacts, I always just like to ramp it right up. So we can see that that's the inner column padding, so that's that part here. But I think 12 is actually okay. Maybe a little bit higher. But certainly the rows are fine, and but this would allow you to increase the separation between rows. In fact, maybe a little bit there. So you can play with that for a little bit. In fact, yeah, I think that actually makes a bit of sense. And then let's see this top bit here. Just brings it back down a little bit. I think because we've got the padding here, it's not so important, this one here. And then, yeah, I think that's a little bit better there. Just again, creating a little bit of white space, and just allowing a little bit of focus on the actual thing that matters, which is these lines here. Right, I think we're looking pretty good. Okay, so next we're going to look at some labeling. Now we've got data labels here, and I'm going to switch these on. And what I've done is the default is a label density of 50%, and it kind of adds labels to roughly 50% of it. Doesn't really add labels to 50% because quite a few data points here, but it kind of tells you how many labels, or determines how many labels there's going to be in the space that's available. Now if I go right down to 0%, kind of does a half decent job of getting the first and the last one, and then it adds in an extra few labels for things it thinks are Power BI has determined are maybe points of reference. But the trouble is, these labels are not really well placed. Okay, we can see here that they're kind of impeded by the line. So actually, in my opinion, until they can get that so that these are this auto placement here, which is, you can either have above or below the auto, but the above works for some of them, but then others that worked fine before are going to be impeded by the line, and the same happens for below. So until this auto becomes a little bit more intelligent, then I'm going to switch it off for these. Okay, but what I am going to do is I'm going to add in a measure that's going to highlight the first, the last, and if it's not the first and the last, the highest and the lowest values, and that just helps to kind of create a little bit of a just makes it easier to read, because you've got these waypoints that are little indicators for each one of those values. So I'm going to go and do that. Okay, so this measure essentially goes and finds the date on which the minimum value in the date range occurs, the date on which the maximum value in the date range occurs, and then it finds the minimum cost for the date range, and then the maximum cost for all the values shown in the date range. And each one of these will be in the context of that category value, so maintenance, integrity, wells, etc. And then we've got an if statement at the bottom here that says if the current date equals the minimum date, or the current date equals the maximum date, or the current cost equals the minimum cost, or the current cost equals the maximum cost, then we want to display the maintenance cost. Otherwise, we're going to display a blank. Okay, so this measure will only display the maintenance cost if it meets either of those four conditions: first date, last date, highest cost, lowest cost in the actual date range. Now, next I'm going to go and I'm going to add that in to my chart. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to add it into the x-axis. Okay, so it's going to look a little bit weird just now. So I just got to go and do a little bit of configuration there. So I'm going to go to lines and I'm going to select this one here, which is maintenance cost and first last, max min, and then I'm going to change the stroke width to 0, and then I'm going to go to markers and I'm going to turn those on. It's going to look a bit funky just now, and then I'm going to go and select the maintenance department cost. I'm going to turn the markers off for that, and then I'm going to go to the maintenance first, last, high, low, and I'm going to leave the markers on for that. And we can see that the first and the last will also happen to be the highest and lowest here, but for some of the other ones, it's we've got highs and lows that are within it, and some have got multiple highs and lows as well that are the same on both days. So that's 65 there, or 60 there, and 60 there. So let's just reduce this slightly. Yep, that's fine. And then we'll turn the color to be the same color as the line. Perfect. Okay, so it just makes it a little bit easier to read now that you've got these little waypoints. In fact, I'm going to actually go back and just change this to make it a little bit bigger. No, it won't. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, we'll leave it like that for just now. So hopefully you've got a bit of an understanding about how you could actually create these lines here. One more thing, actually I'm going to get rid of this legend. So now that I've added another measure, it's added this legend in, so let's get rid of this. We don't need that. Right, so now we've got nice little waypoints telling us exactly where the highs and the lows are, and this is going to allow us to, oh yeah, the high must be the last point there. Yeah, just make it a little bit easier to read it. And of course you can get the values when you hover over the top here like this. Okay, it's going to tell you the value there, the highest and the lowest, etc. So that is the small multiples when used in line charts. Next we're going to look at small multiples for bar charts. Okay, so everything here that we've done in terms of the configuration is pretty much the same. So really putting the title, putting a bit of padding, creating these borders here and this divider line here is all the same as for the previous example. So I'm not going to cover that again. But some of the things I am going to cover are this here, where they've actually, rather than create these as being column charts, I've actually changed them to be bar charts. Okay, so I've gone in here and I've gone in the type here and changed that to a bar chart instead of a column chart. I just think it looks a little bit better. So if I go back to this here, we can see we can have it here, but I just think reading these is a little bit awkward. So I've actually just changed it into one of these bar charts, which I think is a little neater. You can read these from left to right, and that's from left to right as well. So it just means you're not sort of twisting your head to see the actual different values there. So that's the first thing I've done. I'll just go back in here and I'm going to sort this by cost again, and we can see that this is actually sorted by safety, environment, production and routine, which is basically the sort order that I've assigned to those particular categories, because it is important that we see that those in that order and not in the order of highest to lowest. So that's important as well. Pretty much that's it. With the colours here, I've just assigned colours to safety and environment just through the bars here, just manually actually added a colour there. And the reason for that is because I really want attention to be drawn to these two categories here, because they're the ones that are most important, and we don't want anything in those categories there in terms of our backlog: safety, critical, environment and critical backlog. And then I've almost not de-highlighted, but I've not drawn attention to production routine by just keeping those the same, so that these are the focus here. So the other thing I've done in the previous one is we turned off the shared access. Now if I turn it off and then do the same here, scale to fit, I kind of think that for this one here, which is backlog work by work order status, I kind of feel that there's a little bit of a misinterpretation of the data, because this value here is high and this value here is high, but that's 3,000. It's almost 7 times the size of that value there. So I think it is important to actually use a shared access for this one. So just be aware that if it is important to basically be able to compare these values like it is on a bar chart, rather than look at the trend, because we're not looking at trends here, we're looking at absolute values, then it may be better to basically switch on this shared access so everything's on the same axis here, which is basically scaled to this maximum value here. And then we can see the comparison here, and we know that these values are far smaller in comparison to this maintenance values here, which is, generally speaking, we can see, because there's more colour and more ink, it's got the biggest backlog. So another example there where we've created these small multiples by adding into this bar chart here. I'll just quickly go through what that was again. Yeah, just adding the department into the small multiples here for this bar chart here. So that is small multiples. A little bit of a long video there, but hopefully you've got some ideas on how you can set up small multiples, some of the configuration options you've got, and how to turn the kind of standard small multiples default into something that's a little bit easier to look at for either the line graphs or for the bar charts. So if you found this useful, then it is always much appreciated and helpful to give it a thumbs up and a like. And if you want to keep up to date with the latest videos, I tend to release one every week or every 10 days, then hit the subscribe button and you'll get a notification in your YouTube account whenever I publish a new video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video.